Hello anatomy students, welcome back. This is the lecture video for Unit 5, Module 2, and today we're talking about the coverings of the brain and spinal cord. In this video, we're only talking about the meninges. These are the learning objectives for you to focus on during this video. Number one, you should be able to name the coverings of the brain and spinal cord, and you should be able to characterize their structures. Describe them for me. Next, tell me about the spaces that exist between them and what is contained within these spaces. And finally, talk about the extensions of the dura mater and describe their locations. So the brain and the spinal cord are made up of pretty delicate nervous tissue, and they are surrounded first and foremost by bone. The skull covers the brain, and the vertebral column encases the spinal cord. But there are also layers of tissue that are going to surround these structures. The first, and these are called meninges. The dura mater is the most superficial layer. Dura means strong, and mater means mother. So this is the strong mother. So it's protective over the nervous tissue. It's strong, it's fibrous, and it's bilayered. The layer that is deep to the dura mater is called the arachnoid mater, and our root, arach, means spider. And there is a spider web quality to the space that lies beneath this meningeal layer, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And finally, we have the pia mater. Now, pia mater means gentle mother. This is the only layer of the meninges that actually touches the nervous tissue. It is a transparent layer, and it supports blood vessels. And you'll be able to see it when we dissect our sheep brains. So you guys have this picture. You should go ahead and label this as we go along. What we're looking at is a section of the head, and this top part here where I'm putting my little star, that is the scalp or the skin that is covering the skull, and here we can see the skull has been cut away. This purplish grayish layer is the most superficial of the meninges. This is the dura mater. But what we're looking at in this first part, you can see how it's kind of peeled away. That's called the periosteal layer. It lines the inside of the bone, so periosteal, around the bone. So it's lining the inside of the skull. The deeper layer is called the meningeal layer. Next, we have this pinkish layer. This is called the arachnoid mater. And finally, in our picture here, so what we're looking at is a frontal section of the head. And this brownish area here, this is representing the gray matter of the cerebral cortex. And above that, which I will highlight in green, this layer right here, this is the pia mater. Once again, delicate, transparent, the only one of the meninges to actually touch the nervous tissue. Now, the dura mater is going to follow the contours of the brain, meaning that where the two cerebral hemispheres are separated from each other by the longitudinal fissure, the dura mater is going to fold inwards in order to make sure that the sides of the longitudinal fissure are covered. We call this infolding of the dura mater inside of the longitudinal fissure the falx. This is kind of pronounced F-A-W-K-S. The falx cerebri that's found within the longitudinal fissure. But the same thing is going to happen in the cerebellum. Remember, the cerebellum is that cauliflower-like structure that kind of hangs off the back of the brain, just inferior to the occipital lobe. This is called the falx cerebelli. And finally, we have something called another similar infolding of our dura mater called the tentorium cerebelli. And this is found between the cerebellum and the cerebrum. So again, you're going to see probably a fragment of that when we dissect our sheep brain, but make sure that you know these in-word extensions because this was the last of those objectives on our objectives. There are spaces that exist in between the meninges. Perhaps you've heard of pregnant women getting something called an epidural when they're giving birth. This is medicine that is given in the epidural space, but this is given in the spinal cord, not in the brain. The epidural typically does not is not located in most brains. The spaces that you are going to find in the brain, however, are the subdural space and the subarachnoid space. The subdural space is found underneath the meningeal layer of the dura mater, and this is considered a potential space because it's not going to emerge unless there's been some kind of trauma or illness. You'll also see it in cadavers. As dehydration kind of sets in and the meningeal layers kind of pull away from each other, that's when you're going to see a potential space. But normally, you should not see it unless there's illness or trauma. And then we have the subarachnoid space. And remember how I said that the root for arachnoid means spider, and this is where it's getting its name. So the arachnoid mater, I'm going to highlight that in green, and then below it you have this cobwebby like tissue that is extending between the arachnoid mater and the pia mater. Now, this tissue is going to provide an extra cushion, but it's also going to contain a space through which our CSF, or our cerebrospinal fluid, is going to flow. And sorry about that line. I don't know what that's about, but I think you get the picture about what I was trying to write there. So the subarachnoid space is going to contain cerebral spinal fluid. That's my point. All right, now we're looking at the spinal cord. As you can see from our picture here, this is the spinous process. So this is the very back of the vertebrae. And then over here, we have the transverse process. And then we also have a transverse process here. So we're looking at the dorsal view of our spinal cord. So the spinal cord is colored a pale yellow, and then right up next to it, just like in the brain, we have the pia mater in orange, we have the arachnoid mater in pink, and we have in purple the dura mater. Oh, and I also just wanted to make mention, notice that even our roots that branch off of our spinal cord are also covered with these meninges. This is a cross section of our spinal cord. So now the spinal column has been severed with a transverse cut, and we're looking down onto the top of the spinal cord itself. And again, you can see that the pia mater is right up against that tissue. And then we have the arachnoid mater, and then we have the dura mater. I feel like this arrow is not pointing directly at the dura mater, but here it is in green, the dura mater. Now, the epidural space, as I mentioned, not found in most brains. It is found, excuse me, in the spinal cord. And so the epidural space is superficial to the dura mater. So that's this pale yellow portion that I'm highlighting here for you. It's a cushion of fat and connective tissue. So it's going to add some extra support to the spinal cord and kind of protect it from knocking against its bony casing when it gets jarred. Now, the spinal cord, you may interest you to know, is going to end in the lumbar area, so it doesn't travel all the way down into the sacrum. And the reason for this is because the spinal cord grows more slowly than the vertebral column, and so the vertebral column just outpaces it. So anyway, the meninges, which are surrounding that spinal cord, are going to continue through the lumbar section of the spine down into the sacrum. And eventually we have just a thin, tiny filament of pia mater. And at the third segment of the sacrum, it's going to blend with the dura mater and it's going to become the periosteum. So it's going to end up becoming a cover through the rest of the sacrum here in the very bottommost portions of our spine. All right, so I'm going to show you a question and then I'm going to give you a 3 count and then I'll show you the answers so that you can try and answer these on your own. All right, our question number 1. Name the meningeal layers from superficial to deep. 3, 2, 1. Dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater. Number 2. Which meningeal layer is transparent and contains blood vessels? 3, 2, 1. Pia mater. Number 3. Which of the coverings also forms the periosteum of the inside of the skull? 3, 2, 1. Dura mater. And that's the periosteal layer of the dura mater. Number 4. Where would you find cerebrospinal fluid? 3, 2, 1. Subarachnoid space. Finally, where would you find the tentorium cerebelli? 3, 2, 1. Between the cerebrum and the cerebellum. All right, that's all I've got for you for this video. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for Unit 5, Module 2, Video 2, all about cerebrospinal fluid. See ya.